Good morning. So we're up to Zion, and we're studying the Sugi of Rava. Omar Rava, the last few words on Dvavam and Beis, Tein Manu Leploni. So she says, look, instead of giving me the money for Kiddushin, give it to so-and-so, and I'll marry you. And in effect, this person who's shelling out of his own pocket is like her shliach. Meaning she wants to give money to so-and-so for whatever reason. So in a sense, that money that, let's say, is designated, imagine a pile of mows, she's going to give that over to so-and-so. So she says to the Makadesh, you know what? Save me that money, and instead of giving it to so-and-so, instead of my giving it to so-and-so, you give the money from your pocket to so-and-so. And in effect, it's almost as if she received that money. Says Rava, on the top of Daf Zayin Amud Aleph, Tein Manu Leploni Vakadish Lecha, Mekudeshes Midin Arev. If the Malveh is shelling out money to the Loveh, to lend the Loveh money, the Arev is Meshabin himself to pay back that Chov, and Arev Lav Afagav de Lomoti Anoli Yodi Kameshabli Nafshe, he's Meshabin himself, which is a kind of a Hakna, even though he doesn't receive anything. Normally, a Hakna means you receive something. Hai Isonami Afagav de Lomoti Anoli Yoda. Umakni nafsha. She can be makna herself without receiving anything. So don't ask me, says Rava, what's the source or the basis for a woman being makna herself and creating issues without receiving anything? Well, the Arev is makna his shibudim, his chayvus, to pay back the chov, even though he didn't receive any money. The money was given to the Lova, not to the Arev. Rava continues. Helech manav iskachi leploni. He says to her, let's call him Ruvain, says to Rachel, take this money and you'll be married to Shimon. In other words, in effect, Ruvain is a stand-up for Shimon. And instead of Shimon the Makadesh giving the money to Rachel the Miskadeshes, Ruvain is going to shell out the money. And that money is going ki'ilu from Shimon to Rachel for Kiddushin, even though Shimon didn't lose a penny. Says Rava, and where do I find a source for such a thing? Mekudeshes midin Eved Knani. In the case of Eved Knani, somebody comes along and pays up the Adon and frees the Eved. Eved Knani lav afal gavdalo chosev velo midi kakani nafshe. The Eved is kona himself with the kesef, and he goes to the cherus, even though he didn't pay for his cherus, somebody else paid for his cherus. So therefore, Shimon could be Makadesh Rachel, even though nothing comes out of his pocket, because Reuven is shelling out the money. Even though this person, we'll call him the Meshaleach. Again, that's a very confusing word here in this context, because he never appointed Reuven as a shliach. Had he appointed Reuven as a shliach, that would be a whole different question. But Reuven is operating ki'ilu on behalf of Shimon, and therefore, afagav lo chaselo midi, even though Shimon is being kona without paying money, He could be kona this isha. So we have two sides of a coin, says Rava. You could have a das makna from the isha, even though she doesn't receive anything. You could have a das kona of the makadesh, even though he's not giving anything. And now Rava is going to piggyback both chidushim, one on top of the other. And what's the case? A woman says to a man, Tein mana leploni. Again, she's not receiving anything, and yes, she's makna herself. V'akadish ani lo, I'm not going to be makadish to you because you shelled out the money as if I had received the money from you. You are giving the money on behalf of him. So I'm going to be makadish to Shimon, not to Reuven. And now Rava explains all these dinim. So the first case of the three cases of Rava was Tein mana leploni v'akadesh lecha, is Arev lav afa gavdol komati ano liyodim shabi nafshi. So he could be makna himself, the Arev, with a generated hischayvus without receiving anything in return. Is hayisonami. So too, she doesn't receive anything because she says Tein mana leploni v'afa gavdol komati ano liyodim komati nafshi. So Rav explains why he needs Eved Knani. The limud and the analogy to Arev is not sufficient. Midomit. This is kind of like a tzadis shavah. If we only had Arev, we cannot derive any conclusions from Arev. Arev per se would not be a persuasive argument. Because Haidika Konile, who's the Kona in the case of Arev? It's the Malva. The Malva is being Kona, the Shibudim of the Arev. And Kachaser Mana, he's paying for that because he's giving money to the Lova at the commission and command of the Arev. So the person who is being kona is paying for what he's being kona. But a high gavra, but in the case of Kiddushin, Tein mana leploni, the kona, which is Shimon, kakani leilai is sovelo kochas v'lo midi. Nothing comes out of his pocket. It only came out of the pocket of Reuven. And therefore, we need cavalry here. We have to plug up the hole here by introducing Eved Knani. Eved Knani yochiach. I'm going to prove to you from Eved Knani that the Kona doesn't have to pay for that which he is acquiring, the local chasim mamona. The Eved is acquiring himself. He should be paying for his own freedom. V'kokani nafshi, even though somebody else is being paid to him on his behalf. But Rava goes on to say that if I only had Eved Knani, that would not be sufficient. I need not only Eved Knani as a source, but I also have to add Aref. Why? Mi Dami, is there a real analogy here to Eved Knani? Hasam hach dikamakni kakani. The Adon is being makna the Eved to himself, and he's receiving money. So that the makna, which in this case is the Adon, is receiving money. In the case of the Isha, she's the makna, and yet she's not receiving money. Ha, ha, hi issa kamakni nafshe v'lo kakanya lo midi Arev yochiach. And now we go back to Arev, because in the case of Arev, afagav de lo kabati ano liyadeh, the Arev is being makna, even though he's not getting anything tmucha, any compensation for being makna. So afagav de lo komoti ano liyodi mishabi nafshe, and so too in the case of an isha, she could be makna herself, even though she's not receiving anything, and that we see from Arev. But again, if you only had Arev, that would not be sufficient evidence, because in the case of Arev, the Malveh is receiving as a koneh from the Arev this chayvus and the shibud, and he's paying for that. Whereas here, Shimon is receiving a kinyan on the Isha and he's not paying for it. So that I need Eved Knani. Because in Eved Knani, the Eved is being koneh himself without paying for it. So too, Shimon could be koneh the Isha without paying for it. But that's not sufficient if we only had Eved Knani, because in the case of Eved Knani, the makne, meaning the adon, is receiving money. In the case of the Isha, she's the makne, she's not receiving money. But in the case, so then we introduce Arev, because in the case of the Arev is makne himself, even though he hasn't received the money went to the Lova. I think we skipped one line. I apologize. So the line that we skipped is Tein Monel Plone. Oh, no, we did that. I'm sorry. Yeah, we did. Okay, now. The sugya we just learned, by the way, could probably take us a week if we learned it in, but I think we did a pretty adequate job. Boy, Rava has the following suffix. A man gives a mana to so-and-so on the commission of the Isha. So she says, give money to so-and-so. This is not Rava's original case of Arev, where Ruvain is giving money to Shimon and she's being Mekadesh to Shimon. In this case, she wants to be Mekadesh to Ruvain, Ki'ilu, for the favor that Ruvain is paying Shimon. And we'll soon see that Lamaskana, Rav is based on what's called Hana, is like Shava Kesed. But right now, at this point, the Gemara thinks that we're working with Kinyan Agav, which means that money is being given, and Agav that money, a person is being makna himself. In this case, it's herself. Omar Marzucha Mishmei Rav Papi objects, Mekudeshes Omale Rav Ashi Marzucha Imkain. It means that Agav, the Mos, she's being makna herself. And she has the status of karka, in the sense of nechosim shein lemachrayis, and the kesef is metaltalid, and you can't be kona, you can't be makna, I should say, karka agav metaltal. Because on Anibcha Tanan, we have a Mishnah that says just the opposite. That nechosim shein lemachrayis nickname nechosim shein lemachrayis kesef shtar chazaka. You could be makna karka, and agav the karka, you could be makna metaltal, but it can't go the other way around. Amalei, so Marzucha says, Misavas the Amalei Agav. You think that Rav is predicated on Agav? No, that's not true. What Rav is predicated on is the Hana that she gets from the fact that he receives that money. Hacha bi Adam Chashiv Askinan. So the makabel here is a person who's an Adam Chashiv. He doesn't usually accept gifts. Soni batonas yichya. And the woman gets hana from the fact that he, the makabel matana, is willing to accept her gift. Tahi hana, behahi hana, the makabel matana mina, gamra makna lanafsha. So she says to Ploni, I want to marry you. Will you accept money? And even though the money is going from her pocket into his bank account, nevertheless, she gets such hana from the fact that he accepted the money that she's makna herself. And that's called shava kesef kekesef. Now we go back to the three cases of Rava that we started with here. And Rava is adding the following comment, that just like we said that if there's Kiddushin midin Orev, or midin Eved Knani, or midin Shneim, the Kiddushin Achal, so too, the same parallel cases in Didi Momenos Fakno would work. For example, number one, a man says to his friend, give money to so-and-so, and it's as if the mocher wants to give money to so-and-so, to Shimon, and he says to Reuven, I'm going to sell you my sada if you give that money to Shimon. And that's called Arev. Or alternatively, the mocher says to the Lokeach, give money to so-and-so, and I'll be machni you the sada. And that so-and-so is going to be kona the sada, midin erev knani. Now we have a double case, where tain mana leploni, v'timocher lo sada, you give money to so-and-so, and I'm going to be makna my field to him. And that's a combination of Orev and Eved Knan. Utzrich. Why does Rava feel compelled to reiterate these three cases, and they are valid even in Momenos, even in Mechira? The Ashmin in Kiddushin, I would have thought, Mishum Da'isa Nichale Becholdu, Kiddush Lakish Neamrish Lakish Tablu Beta Tavdu Mutate and Armel. A woman is willing to makna herself even for a koldu, because she's very eager to get married. She doesn't want to stay lonely and single. But in the case of Mammon, he's selling his field. He doesn't have a complete Kamiris Das unless he's receiving the money. If I only knew about Mammon, Mishum Dis Yaev Le B'Mechila. Mammon lends itself to Mechila. So therefore, you could be Makna and Kona B'Tovas Hana, even if it wouldn't be considered Kesef al Kiddushin. Aim alone. Here the Torah says, as far as Isur v'Heter, to make that Kinyan Isur, you need Kesef Gomur. And here she's not receiving Kesef Gomur, so I need both cases. Okay, then the worst is behind us for today. Baruch Hashem. So I just want to mention, Rabbi, that we'll negotiate on Sunday. Again, we have to finalize the time, but it could be that we'll do Daf Ches, which if we were going on the Seder Hayom, that would be Shabbos's Daf. But for us, we're a day ahead, so we can decide the luxury of doing Daf Ches on Sunday. All right, we'll talk about it. Amar Rava is Kachi Lila Chetzi. You're only married to half of me. That means my other half could marry another woman. Mikudesh is a valid Kiddushin, but Chetzech Mikudeshli, if I'm going to marry half of you, Eina Mikudesh, Amalei Abayla Rava Maishna. What's the difference between Chetzech Mikudeshli? Mikudesh is going to tell me, Isha Amar Achmar V'lo Chatze Isha. The Torah says, Ki Kach Ish Isha, you have to take the totality of the woman, not half of the woman. Hachanami here too, the Torah says, Ish. Ki Kach Ish Isha, Amar Achmar V'lo Chatze Ish. Amalei Rava says to Abaye, that's not a kash. Hachi hash hasam. In the case of Chetzech Mikudeshesli, what does it mean that he's leaving out half of the woman? Can she marry another man? Is solabei trei lo chazir. A woman can't be married to two men because the nature of the ishus is asura akoli alma kehegdesh. So she can't be muteris to another man. Ela gavra milo chazir betrei. A man can marry two women. I always say one is enough. But if she accepts those conditions that he sets down, that if he says to her, if in event I want to marry another woman, I'm okay, I have the laissez-faire to do so, and she accepts that Kiddushin, it's valid. If a man is Makadish half of a woman, Now, again, I don't know how you divide up the woman. Do you do it vertically? Do you do it horizontally? Is it the torso as opposed to the legs? I don't know. But let's say we do it vertically, right down the middle. So we should say that once the Kiddushin is chal on half of the body of the woman, it now spreads out and encompasses the entire body, because that's how it works in Hegdesh. If you're magdish half an animal, then the other half of the animal becomes kadosh, and Kiddushin is like Hegdesh. Tanya, we went to the Bryce Omer Ragla Shell Zu Ola. Now, regel is only a small part of the body of an animal. It's not even a crucial part. It's tehei kula ola. Vafilu madi omar hanibili. When do we apply the principle of pashta kula bekula? Is heichi the bekade the magdish davar she'ein haneshama? Just one second. Omer ragla shel zuli ola tehei kula ola. Oh, okay. So according to the first Mandi Omar, and this is based on a sugya in Tmura, once you magdish part of the animal, you even if it's only the regular, you apply. But afilu Mandi Omar ein kula ola. That since he was only magdish the regel, which is what? The magdish the animal could live without the regel. So when he's makadesh half of the woman, that certainly is neshama tluyaba. She needs half of her body to survive, and therefore we should apply the principle of pashta kula bekulo. Me, Dami, the Gemara says, "Name you cannot equate the laws of Hegdesh with the laws of Kiddusha Isha. Hasam b'behema, hachadas acheres. In the case of Kiddusha, we need hadas in order that the Kiddusha should be chal. And she only had das to be Makadesh, to be Miskadeshes for half of her, which is impossible. In the case of Behema has no das, and the Magdish was Magdish half, and now the Kedusha is chal throughout the entire body of the animal. And that's the principle of Pashta Kedusha Bakula. I mean, the Mefarshim here have to understand, I mean, the Magdish only want to Magdish half the animal. So there also is a din of das. And Rashi uses a strange language. He says, Yesh koch b'mamoro lifshot. It sounds like Rashi's learning that Pashta Kedusha L'Kula is not a din in the chefts of the animal, but in the way we understand what he declared. So it's Pashta b'mamoro, according to Rashi. Yesh koch b'mamoro lifshot. So even though he was Magdish only Chatzi Behema, his Dibur somehow expands to include the entire Behema. So Gemara says the following. The reason why we don't apply Pashta Kula Kedusha Bekula in the case of Isha, as we said before, because we need Hadas. But furthermore, Halodamya, the din of Rava, by analogy, could only be equated El Lahadi Rabbi Yochanan Behema Shel Shnei Shutvim Higdish Chetzia V'Chazav V'Lokcha V'Gdisha Kula V'Eina Krev is Kedosha V'Eina Krev. The Yotze Tmuro Tmarasa Kayotzins. So I think what the Gemara is saying here, I think it means the following, that in Kiddushin, if he was Makadesh half the Isha, but then he goes back and he was Makadesh the other half of the Isha, now Rava has an issue, would that Kiddushin be Chal in segments? And the answer is no. Because in the case of Behema, in Hegdesh, which is the parallel case to Kiddushay Isha, if he was Magdish his half of the Shutfis, then he buys up the other half of the Shutfis and he's Magdish the second half, is Eina Kreva. You cannot bring this animal as a carbon. That's called Dichui, as we'll soon see on Daf Zayin Amud Beis. So although it does have some sort of basic Kiddusha, as far as the Chefetz of the animal is concerned, and the Nafkamina is Osa Tmura, that you could take another Behemoth Skulin and say Arezu Kizu, but nevertheless the Tmura will be Kayotzi Bazeh, and it's not Olam Mizbeach. Now, if a man is Magdish, Chatzi Behema, because he's a Shutav, we're not going to apply the principle of his Pashta Kiddusha V'Kula because the other half belongs to the other Shutav, and he never agreed to be Magdish. So therefore, in the case of Kiddushin, where we need Hadas to be Maskim, she's not Maskim to half a Kiddushin, and therefore we don't apply the principle of his Pashta V'Kula.